Good morning, good evening, good day, everyone. This is Ludika Pekina with GAI Insights. Welcome to Daily AI News Review, where we rate the news essential, important, and optional, helping you navigate through the mass of news that happens every day. You can follow along and see the articles we're going to be talking about at gaiinsights.com/articles. Today, I have John, Paul, Tim, Pankaj, and Amanda from our regular crew, and our special guest, Chris Curran. Chris, thanks for joining.
Good morning.
Good morning. Chris is a professor of practice teaching entrepreneurship at Texas A&M University, and he is a retired PwC partner. So let's start. We have an exciting set of news today. Let's start with the first one. Ankash, please.
Sure, Luda, coming right up. Okay, so the first one that we have today is about Anthropic's Claude, how it can now search your entire Google workspace without you.
Yes. Tim, what did you think about Claude putting together the functionality and going in direct competition with OpenAI and Google in that space? What did you think about that?
I think this is essential news. It is a product announcement, but and we're gonna have another one a little bit later from OpenAI. But this is they put a lot of stuff out here that's pretty important, and they're one of the market leaders. So I think you got to pay attention to this stuff. In particular, they did they did a number of things that you could call catch up, like they put out a deep research kind of reasoning model beyond what they already had. Then they integrated Google Workspace and Google Drive, although the Google Drive you have to have an enterprise license for, so there are some restrictions to parts of this. But there was just a lot of powerful stuff here, and you know, they're a leader in the market. I think you got to pay attention, particularly if you're a Google shop. Up until now, I think you've been pretty focused on Gemini and Google, and all of a sudden, these folks are saying, well, you don't have to do that.
Yeah. What did you think about this, Amanda?
Yeah, so a couple things that stood out to me, as a user as well, thinking about this not just as an executive, but as a both, is they claim that this thing's going to start being faster with the research process and about fighting hallucinations. I feel like everywhere I turn, everybody is constantly still on hallucinations, which I know at GAI we don't like that term, but it's constantly coming up still. I mean, in all the courses that I'm facilitating, everyone's like, what's your way of fighting hallucinations? So for them even to mention it, and they're claiming now that they're using more citations and things like this, I haven't looked, into this, so I don't know how well it's working personally, but if it's true, that's important because like I said, I keep fighting ChatGPT, and I think a lot of their sources to me still are not great at all. It's just my personal opinion. So if they can do better than that, I think that's a good thing. So for me, I'm at least important on this article.
At least important. John, at least important and essential from Tim.
Yeah, I was on the fence between important and essential. I can go essential for all the reasons that Tim said. I think the other thing is that it's just amazing how quickly the market is maturing into full suites of enterprise systems. So in personal computers, this took about 5 years or so. This market's taken about 18, 24 months. So
it's certainly a fight for the enterprise user. Paul, okay with essential? Chris, anything to add?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
The thing I found interesting about this is that, Claude has been, banging the drum on coding for a while. And I thought it was interesting to see them stick their head out in terms of the enterprise sort of discussion now. So that was what was interesting to me about this. So definitely an interesting piece of news, I think.
Yeah,
I would just, I'd double down at Tim's. I think this is super essential for a couple of reasons. One is that the major trend here is that let's call them AI natives, the OpenAI and Claudes of the world are wildly out innovating the quote incumbents, Google, Workspace, Microsoft. And what's happening is they're doing a fabulous job on the interface, and they're also sucking all that data out. So I think they're really going to have powerful positions. And I've been now 4 conversations with companies who are trying to understand what their AI enterprise search strategy is. And they're looking at Glean, they're looking at OpenAI, they're going to start looking at this. So the idea that you can go have more and more tools, not only access your information, but start constantly doing tasks for you on your most important information on your day job, I think is a major trend that all the enterprise leaders need to increasingly understand what their architectural approach is for the next 2 years, because this is only going to get even more powerful or more competitive because the stakes are so high.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well said,
Totally
Paul.
agree. And Ram is asking if Google is an investor. And yes, Google is a major investor. People think of Anthropic as Amazon's large language model, which is true. They are the largest investor. But in fact, Google is a major investor in Anthropic as well. So,
Yeah.
and if I took away one thing from the Imagination in Action conference, it's despite our protestations about how fast this market is moving, it's accelerating.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
Tim, do you think Google buys Anthropic, or
I don't think they can, because I think Amazon owns more.
big? Yeah.
I think it would be hard for them to outbid Amazon. I think it's likely Amazon might buy Anthropic.
Yeah. But it is certainly.
But it might be neither of them, because they're the scorpions under the glass, right?
Yeah. All right. Great discussion. Essential it is. Let's proceed, please.
Okay, moving on to the next one. This comes from Kling AI, and they have revealed 2 new SOTA models, Colors 2 for image generation and Kling 2.0 master video model.
Stunning. What did you think about this, Amanda?
Yeah, so I think it's really cool, but I think it's totally optional for the leader. So I mean, there's a lot of things you can do there with like custom style creations, like add, swap, delete elements in video. So there's all kinds of stuff that can be done, lip sync. So there's a lot of things like, but by the way, it's not just on this. You have to actually look into this to find this information. It's not just right there for you in like a tweet kind of thing. So you have to actually do some digging around. But yeah, I feel like for the typical leader, it's cool, but it's optional.
Okay, we're going optional. Anybody objects to that, please?
No, it's another everyday miracle. It's fabulous. If you look at the little videos of the image stuff and the video stuff, it is Chinese architecture. So I think that's going to be a non-starter for a lot of enterprises.
Yeah, optional it is. Let's proceed. We have a lot of news to cover. Next one, Ankash, please.
Sure. The next one comes from Siemens, and they have developed an industrial foundation model.
Yeah, Siemens have been in the news with this flag for industrial engineering, working on introducing Gen AI platforms specifically in that space. This is a what Tim will call a product announcement, and talking about how they're going to put more wisdom in the foundation model about from engineering perspective. What did you think about this, Chris?
Yeah, it struck me as a little bit of screenware, to be honest. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, they are putting out a request for anybody interested to give them training data. So I thought that was pretty funny. I kind of poked around a little bit. I work in the College of Engineering at Texas A&M. I'm not a professional engineer, software person by training and by interest. But I do hear lots of mechanical engineers, industrial engineers talking about generative AI all the time. And a lot of the discussions we have are around modeling. They mentioned that in here. The idea of, okay, well, now that 4.0 is really good at generating images, can I take that 2D image and create a 3D model out of it? And then can I convert that into CAD? And then can I, send that to a CNC mill or a 3D printer. And products like Blender do that pretty well today, and a lot of the CAD guys are coming out with their own generative workflows. That I think that, I looked around a little bit, and it looks like Emerson is doing something similar here with their devices and their standards. So, I mean, to me, this is, I don't think this is really a product announcement. I think it's an intent announcement. They want to do this for their products, and they want to be able to generate code to drive their PLCs and their other controllers and things like that. So I would say this is optional. One other little nugget that I was wondering about, because they talk about handling and understanding engineering terms and concepts. So I was just interested to see if there was a benchmark for professional licensing exams like there are for other exams. And it looks like the first step in getting a professional engineering license is called like Fundamentals of Engineering or something like that. And the base models are getting 70 to 75% on these exams already. So in terms of the, we need LLMs to understand engineering concepts. I think, we're kind of already there or close to being there already. So to me, this is more about the, generating technical documents for civil engineers to submit to, the regulators or whatever. Or in this case, generating proprietary control code and stuff like that, which seems pretty self-serving. I don't know. That was my take on it. So I would say optional and kind of, marketing wear here.
Okay. Optional from Chris. Any thoughts on important for this? Trend is certainly important. If there is a foundation model that is equipped with understanding the schematics, converting into CAM, I personally think this is an important step in getting such repository. Even what did you think, John?
Yeah, I could give it an important. I agree with Chris. Like, hey, this is more aspiration, but got Siemens in here. A huge company. I think it's interesting. The industrials are starting to compete on the virtual value chain, right? Their information component here, and going to be critical. So I'm fine with the optional and important.
I mean, what would get me really excited is if they were leading the charge on an open model, for example. Yeah. Getting the engineering firms and the technical people out there to work together to improve it. I'd be like, wow, that's amazing. But that's why I thought it was kind of optional, because there's not a lot of depth in this.
Yeah, I'm on the big time optional camp here. It's a product announcement, and yes, it's aspirational. Yes, it could be important. Yes, the trend is important, but we're not there. And in fact, I still think this question is largely unsettled as to whether you're going to have better modeling from a very specifically data trained, not niche, but let's say vertical model versus these very powerful general models that seem to be pretty good at a lot of stuff. There's not been a lot of times when the vertical models have proven significant outperformance over general purpose models. So we'll see. But I'm in the Missouri camp right now. This is an announcement. They haven't done anything. I want to see some real evidence.
Yeah, no, I'm with you in that regard. Amanda, optional?
Yeah, I'm optional because, again, just the trend towards more like a small language model, which I don't know that I'd call it this either, depending on data, but just the use case specific model, I think, is a better way to say it.
Yeah. Okay, optional it is. Let's proceed. Ankash, please.
Okay, the next one is a big one and comes from OpenAI. They have introduced OpenAI O3 and O4 mini models.
Yes, and they have another announcement that we'll also discuss. But Amanda, could you introduce this one and tell us what you think?
So I apologize, Lud. I didn't see this one. I saw a different one, so I'll let somebody else take charge of this one.
Yeah, I read this one.
Okay.
I think this is essential. This is it's amazing that, Anthropic comes out with this big announcement, and literally overnight, OpenAI comes out with an equally big announcement, in my opinion. The fact that they have shown that they can scale inference and that they also improve the speed dramatically, because that was one of the big claims for Anthropic, was they had this faster reasoning model that they thought would be a big deal for corporations and enterprises. And here we all of a sudden have OpenAI saying similar things and showing similar benchmarks. And the ability to use this is what OpenAI has said, and they are, to their credit, delivering on it, at least in the announcement. Again, we give a lot more credibility to OpenAI and Anthropic announcements because they are leaders in the space and they're already working with people. They even cite some people and tons of benchmarks. So I think as the leader in the market, you got to pay attention to what these folks are doing. And the fact that they're demonstrating integration of the tool sets, reasoning on the integration of the tool sets. So again, a little reflexive, as we call it technically, or a meta level thing. So they're not only using the reasoning for your queries for them, but they're using the reasoning in their own internal processes to determine, when should I write some Python code? When should I search the web? When should I do this? When should I do that? And it's proving, at least in the benchmarks, pretty powerful.
Yeah, and this comes on the heels of introducing 4.1 and retiring 4.5. So they're certainly putting together a set of models that is very comprehensive from all points of view. Okay, so essential, and any dissenters here? Anybody wants to say optional or important rather than essential?
I'll just
Okay.
throw in a quick little thing I read about this launch here. Ethan Mollick was retweeting something from Tyler Cohen, who was saying O3 marks the point at which we've got AGI, and his case was, what else do you want? So I'm like, well, I wonder how good it is, because I hadn't played around with it yet. So I went and tried it for a founder that I'm working with who has started her own golf club company. Anyway, we're trying to figure out the right way to take what are the next channels we should go for to try to sell her product. So I gave O3 a prompt like that, and it was the most specific, amazing response that I've ever seen from a query. And it had a very specific idea for using a type of promotion on Amazon for selling these clubs and positioning and advertising and everything. And the answer was ridiculously good and specific, because that's my biggest gripe, is a lot of this stuff is, a lot of the LLM responses are good, but pretty generic. But
Yeah.
this one was ridiculously good. So I was like, wow, that is pretty good. So maybe we have AGI. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, we have some doubters here. Ashish is commenting that the OpenAI is playing the news game, and it's just improvements on top of what they already had. Well, we'll have to see. But essential news. Paul, do you want to introduce the other news that they just announced that many of you have not seen?
I love Ashish's thing. They can't count cars in the parking lot, so it's not AGI.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know if it can or can't. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, Paul, are you there?
I don't think he can hear us. I don't know what's going on. I do think Ashish is right that they are that OpenAI is trying to stay in the news cycle, and which is totally smart. I mean, Microsoft should be doing the same thing. But anyway,
so
yeah, I have it as essential. I hear you.
Have the news open, John, on the OpenAI acquiring Windsor for $3 billion. I don't have the article, so we're not going to review it.
It's a rumor. It's not a fact.
Rumor. It's not yet.
There's a million articles saying that OpenAI is considering buying Windsurf for $3 billion, including from financial outlets like CNBC. Usually when you get that level of rumor, it's true, but it is a rumor at this point. It is not fact. So it appears that OpenAI is going to buy Windsurf for $3 billion.
Yeah. So I was looking for the article confirming that, but I couldn't find it. That's why I just the rumor. Okay, so skip it for now and mark this one essential, and let's proceed. Ankash, please.
Okay, the next one is about C.H. Robinson, how their AI has performed over 3 million shipping tasks.
Yes, John. This is a short but a very
Yeah.
cool article. Please.
Yeah, I was going to give it. It was between important and essential. It's a nice little case study. It's for a leading shipping company doing millions of transactions. I think shipping and supply chain are particularly interesting because it's kind of a semi-structured domain, if you will. And so the fact they've got very effective agents doing these kinds of transactions, and obviously they've solved the problem of hallucinations because you don't want to start shipping the wrong stuff to the wrong place, right? I mean, and so it's. I think it's a nice case study. One thing I would say is that Chris and I worked for many years at a company called Diamond Technology Partners together, and early in our history, back in the mid '90s, we used to talk a lot about how organizations and we're going to turn into more like markets. You're going to have trading of capability inside the organization, and I think that agents are bringing that alive, and so. You look at this application, it's if you will, it's a quasi market, right? It's in between being inside the organization and being a full tradable market. So I think this is going to be an important development that this area of shipping gets more enabled and standardized and interoperable.
As the use cases go, this is quite an impressive.
Yep.
Yeah, in terms of the volume at scale and what they're doing and how much they're saving. So this is quite impressive. Tim, Chris, okay with Essential? Anything to add? Amanda, are you okay with Essential?
Yeah, and I just agree with your scale. Like they said, they already set over 1 million appointments or something like this. So it's not like something that's theory. I mean, it seems like they're really using it. So
yeah. I won't argue. I think Kevin Petrie makes a good point that I was thinking this as I read the article. It's a good article and it does have some good stats. But I wish they would cite error rates and also how they address human oversight, which they did not. So they just act like, oh, we did 1 million autonomous appointments and everything worked perfectly. That would also be interesting to know if that were true, but my guess is that's probably not true. And this is a critical issue. We were just talking about quote unquote hallucinations is how do you deal with that, right? If you do 1 million appointments and what percentage of them go wrong and how do you deal with that? That's fine. Things go wrong even when humans are totally in control, they go wrong. The question is, what's the percentage? Can you correct it at a reasonable cost and make the customers happy?
Yeah, a great point, Tim.
My only complaint, but it's a good article and I won't argue with Essential. It's one of the better ones in citing a real company doing real things.
Yeah, real company doing real things. And in your top pocket, this is an important article. But yeah,
yep.
Maybe there should be an interview with them to talk about how they handled it. They've been at it since quite a long time, preparing their data, analyzing it. So I'm sure that the hallucinations are handled by the maybe semantic trees and the like, so that they check it and recheck it, because in their industry they can't really get it wrong. Okay, let's proceed. Essential it is.
Okay, the next one comes from Thomson Reuters and talks about their GenAI in professional services survey.
Yeah, quite an interesting survey on the services side of the industry. Tim, what did you think about this one?
So I think if you're in legal, tax, professional services, this is absolutely essential. It's a reasonably good study. It's a survey, but Thomson Reuters has good reach. The methodology was reasonable, and it's good data to have, again, in your top pocket if you want to put together a presentation showing where things are. So I think absolutely essential. You could sort of make the broader case for essential because it shows you sort of where the world is, at least in one big set of markets. But, I'm also hesitant to transfer the results of this survey to other industries. But for legal, tax, accounting, professional services in general, this is essential. And the interesting point, I read the whole survey. The most interesting point is how little is actually being done in these areas right now. So I think the consulting companies seem to be ahead of the curve. We read lots of stuff about what McKinsey and PwC and others are doing. It'd be interesting to see a similar kind of study from them as to how far they're really reaching into their work processes, because it certainly appears that you're at the sort of 25% level of usage tops and no real reorganization of labor and workflow processes at all. And more than half even of the law firms had no general policy and no general training on AI.
Yeah, this was stunning actually to read.
Yeah. So you rated it important, Tim? What's the
Important? Sorry, I would say important, essential if you're in these industries.
let me make a case for essential. I know we're running out of time here, but services as a category is about 55% of the $100 trillion global economy, and professional services about 5 to 7%. I would argue, Tim, that it's relevant for everyone, because almost every organization has some kind of service capability, whether it's after sales service or warranties or
yeah.
training.
As I say, you won't get an argument from me. You know more about this, and that's well said. So that's a reasonable case for essential.
Yeah. The other thing I think we're seeing is that we're seeing slowing of hiring. So I don't think people are going to start firing people soon, but the hiring is going to get a lot tighter. And everyone I talk to in services, they are using these robots, there's no question, and they are way more productive. Whether or not that turns into lower prices for customers, more profit for the firms, and so forth. And it's going to be a foot race to see who automates faster. PwC, Accenture, Deloitte, whatever. I'm very bullish on Accenture because they have a history of making capital investments to turn services into software. So anyway.
Yeah, John, you make a good point, but not everything is essential. I was in an important camp. What did you think, Chris?
Of course, everything's not essential. I'm not making that case.
I don't know, but today we have almost everything essential. Chris, what do you think?
I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine yesterday about professional services firms and how good they are at eating their own cooking. So, I think the types of firms that should be using these technologies, professional services has got to be at the top of the list. So I think it's really important to see how they're adopting and using the tools themselves, especially as consumers of those services. So, yeah, I feel like it's essential, but I'm biased as well. So
I see. Okay, Paul, last opinion.
I'm important, but I'll support the team.
Yeah, I'm important as well. So I'm trying to get somebody to side with me, please, because it can be essential for everyone, but for services, it certainly is. So yeah. as a takeaway, Amanda, where do you go? Yeah.
Yeah, I make things difficult because I'm more important too, Luda.
All right, it was important. Let's proceed to the last one, please.
Okay, the last one that we have for today comes from AWS and talks about how Clario is enhancing the quality of clinical trial documentation process with Amazon Bedrock.
A use case, a little bit light on the results. What did you think about this, Chris?
In my consulting career, I never had the opportunity to work in the clinical trials space, but I did do some reading to kind of understand what they're trying to do here. They built this prototype. Clario is a process and data platform company that helps pharma to collect and package clinical trial data for the regulatory bodies and for their own workflow. Anyway, so what this is about is taking cases where they use imaging in a clinical trial, a CAT scan or X-rays and things like that, and generate the playbook basically for the people conducting the clinical trials to train them on how to do it and how to collect the data and all that stuff. So basically, this is a little workflow pilot to auto-generate some of the documentation required to train the people who are performing the clinical trial.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting because for a couple of reasons. One, because I think that it's a pretty straightforward walkthrough of what they did and the tools they use. So if you're an AWS customer, I think it's interesting. I also think it's interesting because it's a pretty straightforward automation of a use case or of a workflow that might be inspiring for somebody who says, "Oh, I could get started doing this," and it's a pretty detailed technical walkthrough. It doesn't talk about any of the business context in this, which is kind of a bummer. I wish I would have been able to read a little bit more about how they're going to impact the actual business of collecting the data and measuring and speeding up the clinical trials. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. I'd say optional.
Yep. Anybody suggest important or essential for this one? Otherwise, we go optional. Okay.
I can live with optional. I sort of had it in the important category. I have worked in life sciences. This is a huge issue. Every stage of documentation, this is one particular stage of documentation, but for every stage of documentation, the life sciences industry just drowns in paperwork. It's mostly regulated, which means every T has to be crossed, every I has to be dotted perfectly, or it slows you down by weeks and months and potentially years. Usually not for this level of just the clinical, but you have to have this right, and it has to be approved by 18 different people within your organization and then the external authorities. So I mean, you're right. They don't really cite the ROI, but it's a good architecture overview. And I can tell you the ROI is big. Even on this small effort, it will be big.
Yeah. So Tim, thanks. But from the point of view of the general AI leader, is that an important article for the clinical trials? It is actually probably essential.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think having these architecture laid out is helpful to see how practically you do these kind of things. And most organizations have similar problems of one sort or another. So yeah, I said I can live with optional. You're right. It's more target. If you have intense documentation requirements in regulated industry like financial services, maybe it transfers more directly. But for other industries, maybe not so much.
Okay, optional it is. Ankaj, please prepare the scorecard for us. Any brief announcements? Paul, John?
I apologize. I had to step off for a second. I assume we talked about the Windsurf acquisition, right?
We did not cover it. We mentioned it because it's rumor. We mentioned it. Yeah.
It's a rumor. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's interesting, I know we got a lot of essentials. We've struggled for months now, Luda, with when something's essential for one industry, but not for others. And we're almost like sorting to essential is for all industries, and important might be essential in one industry.
It's a difficulty here, but we have 3 essentials, 1 important, and 3 optionals today. So a loaded day, a lot of opinions. Thank you all very much.
I have one quick thing I'd like to say.
Okay, go ahead.
I was at the Imagination in Action conference on Tuesday, and the most interesting thing I heard was Andrew Ng, who talked with John Werner towards the end of the day. And he's a famous AI researcher and started a company on education. The most interesting thing I heard all day, he said, "I'm almost to the point where I will not hire anybody who can't program." And and I've felt this way for a long time. So he put it very succinctly. When COBOL was announced, Common Business Oriented Language, that's what it stands for. The claim was we wouldn't need any more programmers, quote unquote. When spreadsheets came around, we wouldn't need any more programmers. And in fact, of course, we have more programmers than ever. And his point was you really need to understand not just how to prompt it, but what the machine actually does at some level so the prompts are right. and that programming is going to be more important than ever. It was a really interesting point.
And let me just highlight, this is a programming mindset and understanding, not a specific language you're talking about, correct?
Right. He's not saying he wants HR practitioners to learn Java, but he is saying, I want HR practitioners to understand how a computer works so they can prompt it correctly and get these things to do what they want to do. And I'm not going to take them pretty soon if they don't.
And that's why I think it's really interesting. The Windsurf is kind of the IDE on steroids for coding. And you start thinking about IDE for marketing, supply chain, HR, industrial. It's really
correct.
For those who are not familiar with it, IDE is integrated development environment.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we can talk about it quite a bit. I really appreciate all the comments, but we need to go. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.